Hello, everyone. Hope you're doing great. It's lovely to be speaking with you. Today, I thought I would do something a little bit different because on Tuesday we ran a webinar with Leah Turner and Pragya Mishra all about how to smash LinkedIn. After that webinar, there were some 102 open questions still left after the webinar. So some were covered during it, and then the vast majority were not covered in the session. And so I thought I would record a video answering all of the questions, but rather than just recording a video and then publishing it somewhere, I thought I would go live. And I thought, you never know, some people might tune in and watch it. So that's what we're doing right now here today. I can see a couple of people viewing in already, which is cool. So why not? So this session is answering 102 open questions about posting on LinkedIn or interacting on LinkedIn. Hopefully it's useful. Let's get going. So the first question, and I'm going to be opening up a very official looking document. Sod's law that would happen immediately. I'm going to be opening up a very official looking document right here, which has all the questions preloaded in. So let me add that to the stream. So let's go. So the first question, hey everyone, thanks for doing this. I was wondering, how do you contact a potential client? I followed a couple of businesses I'm interested in working with, but realized you can't message your business directly. And most of the time, the business has so many employees, you can't find the founder or the CEO. Or even more complicated if you have a free account like myself. Any tips? So this was a question that was answered in the Q&A with Leah and Pragya. Nonetheless, to add to this, then I think inbound LinkedIn is best used when it's used as an inbound platform. I think as an outbound platform, it's somewhat suspect, and I think every one of us would have appreciated at some point being deluged by emails from random people who you don't know and really you don't care to know. It feels automated, and that's probably because it is. With that thought in mind, then really the first thing that you're wanting to do is be treating everyone like a human being and realize that you have to establish a relationship up front. If you're establishing a relationship up front, that means posting great content, but then also interacting with other people to say, hey, I really love your content, and interacting with them. The important thing to say is that you may not necessarily be a quick win. It may not be connecting with the CEO or the founder. Over the course of time, you may have to connect with their team. You may have to get in touch with them and sort of work your way in that way, in a very authentic, genuine and meaningful way. At the end of the day, the platform is very much about giving first and then looking to receive after. And that's a genuine answer in the sense that if you look to do those things, then I think you're on the fast track to creating a relationship with someone that lasts in the long term rather than just a sales-based relationship. Hopefully that's useful. What's the one piece of advice you were given about LinkedIn that you didn't take that you wish you had? So in the webinar, Pragya and Leah pointed to short form video. So video is less than 60 seconds. And I think that was a really great answer. I think the reason for that is that it adds a depth to one's profile, adds a depth to what it's speaking about. Video is often the thing that folks sort of get in touch with me 6 months afterwards and say, actually, you know what? I watched your video and I thought this. Interestingly, videos aren't always the things that people interact with most. In fact, I'm pretty sure that if you post a video, you're far less likely to get a bunch of likes and comments. But they land differently with folks, specifically in a world where short form video seems to be the way forward. Then keep your videos less than 60 seconds, but it feels like there's a real opportunity there. You can also use that video content to then cross post to TikTok and look to be creating a presence there as well. It really seems to be becoming more and more powerful for folks. Next one. What's the best approach for social listening research on LinkedIn? I would actually recommend that you check out the webinar that we did with Pragya and Leah, because Pragya had a really great answer for this. But the summary of it is that you need to know what you're going in to find out. It's all good doing some quote unquote social listening, but if you're just doing social listening for the sake of social listening, then there's no point. So the best approach is to know what the question is to start off with. Pragya then made a recommendation of a really sensible thing, which was to make a note of any time that people mention your company or mention something you're interested in, and pop it in like a Word document or a Slack channel. And in either of those cases, you have the opportunity to be really capturing what folks are speaking about on the regular. Hopefully that's useful. Next one. I never know whether I should be posting on my profile or my page. I get so much engagement on my personal profile, but not so much on my page. So the best historic advice has always been to post from your personal profile. The reason for that is that people, it's the old cliche, but people buy from people. And certainly the algorithms seem to be promoting folks posting from their pages more than anything. However, I would say in recent times, that company pages are really coming into their own and seem to be having a bit of a hot moment. So I don't think they can be disregarded in the same way as they were before. Therefore, what I suggest is that you have a content plan that is representative of both personal profiles and company pages, but use them for different things. So Leah had the suggestion in the webinar that we ran the other day that for the company page, then a lot of her stuff is going to be based around tips and tricks, little hacks, whereas her personal page will be surprisingly more personal. I think that's a really sensible way to go about things. For me, I still think the main opportunity lies in the personal stuff, and particularly from a personal branding perspective, that's far more long-term for you as an individual. But I don't think company pages can be disregarded in the same way as they were only weeks or months ago. Hopefully that's useful. I'm going to have to stop saying hopefully that's useful at the end of every answer. Top tips for building personal brands for company staff, please. So there was a really sensible suggestion from Pragya in the webinar, which was all about building a team around your personal branding. So my time at Rise at 7, I saw this in action. So they had a team of some 8 people who were volunteers who came forward and said, I would like to build my personal brand. Off the back of that, then Rise at 7 gave them all of the resources they needed to build their personal brand. So I would suggest that, first of all, you look for volunteers rather than looking to enforce personal branding upon anyone. I think it has to be a very voluntary process, and that's definitely something that Pragya suggested the other day on Tuesday. But beyond that, I would then suggest that you then give them the resources to go about things. Pragya also suggested that you would have a senior leadership team member who would take the time to be the sort of leadership, take a leadership role in this. I think that seems really sensible to do some modeling behavior. And secondly, she also recommended having a buddying system so folks could engage with one another and look to support one another through something which is a difficult sort of thing to do in personal branding. So that seems sensible too. The only thing I'd add on personal branding is you need to know what you would like to get out of it and what you are about as well. So you may decide to draw up 3 to 5 content pillars about the things that you want to speak about, the things that you want to be known for. And off the back of that, you may decide that all of a sudden you've got this opportunity to be well known for something very specific. If that's the case, then I think you stand to benefit a lot. So know what you want to be known for and what you would like to achieve through your personal branding. How do you use groups properly, and how can you find right ones? Very easy answer. Don't use LinkedIn groups. They're rubbish right now. It's a real shame. Would love to use them more, but there's no point. It's a waste of your time. What's something you didn't expect from LinkedIn that you're excited to have found or learnt? All sorts of stuff. So I would say the thing that I wouldn't have expected from LinkedIn is how it is a platform which people can build genuine connections, not just professional connections. And there's an awful lot of folks who are willing to engage on a far more human level than just a professional level. Anyone that sort of does that, this isn't Facebook dross, is actually getting it wrong. LinkedIn is a great opportunity to connect with other human beings in a very meaningful way. A lot of friends and connections that I've made over the past few years have been based in sincerity and honesty, but also based on this platform. So I think there's a real opportunity in LinkedIn to sort of free yourself from the shackles of professionalism and start to engage as yourself as a human being. Hopefully that's useful. Personal brand versus work brand. Obviously, we use LinkedIn to drive work objectives, so some good suggestions on keeping it well balanced would be fantastic. I would say that the interesting thing here is that you have the opportunity to choose how much you wish to give to a platform like LinkedIn. You have the opportunity to say, I would like to add this to this conversation, and therefore that is what I'm happy to do. I think you get to choose what level of comfort you have in giving yourself over to a platform like LinkedIn to an audience. And it's for you to choose, not for you to have it enforced upon you through other people's actions. It's really important to forget this is your choice. It's really frustrating when folks sort of say, apologize for not posting on LinkedIn. It's a load of rubbish. Just post as much as you like. Post the things that you would like, what you would like to post, and share as much as you would like to. Don't feel like you need to do any of those things on the behalf of other people. It's your profile. You can relax. It's okay. How do you deal with trolls on LinkedIn that you can't deal with your authentic self? Ignore, respond, or ridicule. So don't feed the troll is the first thing to say. Choosing to not engage with these folks is really important because it takes their power away. They want attention. So if you starve them of that, then they go away eventually. The second thing is that, at the end of the day, it's a muscle that one gets used to. If you're going to be putting yourself out there, then ultimately there will be some folks who disagree with your opinion. But there is two spectrums of this. There is love and there is hate. If you're in this gray space in the middle, nobody reacts to anything. So really you're aiming for love or you're aiming for hate, but ideally love. And with that in mind, you have to acknowledge that there will be some folks at the other end of the spectrum who are not going to resonate with what you say, and that's okay. As long as you're aiming to really, really please a bunch of people and know who those people are and feel quite content that no one else is going to sort of touch those folks, then it's absolutely fine. So I'd say aim to love and don't worry about the trolls. They want attention, but if you don't give it them, that's okay. This life's too short. What's the biggest mistake you see on LinkedIn? So Leah had good question, Nick. So disagreeing is trolling. No, disagreeing isn't trolling, but it's I would say actively looking to disagree or actively wishing to be outraged by something or to cause outrage for the sake of a game or fun is trolling. Disagreeing. So Nick has said, as long as we remember LinkedIn isn't Facebook. So Nick is now trolling. Which I love. Thank you. So I'm going to move past it. I'm going to take my own advice. The biggest mistake you see on LinkedIn. So the biggest mistake Leah saw on LinkedIn was folks not realizing that their profile photos are set to private. Ultimately, this means that folks will appear as a gray circle image, and ultimately that means that folks are far less likely to engage with your content. Now, the way that you go into that to check that is that you head into your mobile app and then you click on your profile image, and then in the bottom left you will see the option to go from public, and in the bottom left it may say something like private on your profile image. If that's the case, you need to switch that to public. That gives you the option to for your image to be shown to folks who aren't in your network. That makes it far more likely that folks are far more likely to engage with your content over the long term. The second biggest mistake that I see folks make all the time on LinkedIn is that they share content using the share feature. Unfortunately, using the share feature is not useful at all, because the algorithm, as much as we do not wish to pander to it, does not seem to push shared content at all. So my suggestion would be that if you really like a piece of content, that you choose to make a native post of it yourself. So take the time to I'm enjoying the comments. Thanks, Max. Thanks for being here too. So my recommendation would be to make a native post and post about something yourself rather than using the share feature. I think fundamentally it's really important that we don't use that share feature if you're sharing something you really love, because unfortunately it just won't get the exposure that it deserves to. It's a real bugger. It's a real shame. How to improve engagement from your employees. Employee advocacy feels like it should be key. Is it? Of course, employee advocacy is key, but it has to be genuine and authentic. At the end of the day, we're looking to build relationships that mean something. And if it feels like folks are just saying something because they have to, then fundamentally, we're not going to be reaching people in the way that we want to reach them. So the important thing here is that fundamentally, you need to be making sure that your employees are comfortable advocating for your company and do so on a voluntary basis. And we've discussed 3 different ways of doing that earlier on in this live. So that will be right there for anyone looking for the replay. What's the biggest oversight people tend to make when setting their LinkedIn strategy? I think the biggest oversight that people tend to make when they're setting their LinkedIn strategy is that they start to make it about themselves. They focus on what can I post and what engagement am I going to get? Fundamentally, it's one of those sort of full circle things where I think if you look to benefit other human beings first and foremost, then all of a sudden you start getting the results back. If you start from a place of what can I take from this relationship, ultimately people see through that, then all of a sudden, those likes and engagements don't come. And in 3 to 5 years, you'll be writing a blog post about why LinkedIn is dead. So I think the biggest oversight people tend to make is focusing on I rather than what I can give. I think through that giving strategy, you see far more engagement. You see people wanting to resonate with your content, with your comments, and fundamentally you start building that relationship in a way that has meaning. And meaningful relationships are a great place to build business relationships from. So that would be where I start. Do you ever hit a wall while growing your community? How do you overcome it? So the interesting thing about this is that I think people vastly underestimate how long it takes to build a LinkedIn following. The interesting thing, however, is that you do meet that sort of hockey stick moment. So for us, or for myself on my own profile, then about 20,000 followers was about the moment where 20,000 followers was about that moment where the hockey stick really started to take off. Over the past 3 months at the beginning of this year, I think my followership's gone from something like 25,000 to 32.5 or something like that. So I would say that the beginning stages is that wall that you need to get past. I don't think fundamentally if you're looking to build a community, too many people give up too quick. So I think you have to set an expectation. The way you overcome that is by setting an expectation that you're in it for the long run. You're in it for the long run to help other people, and then fundamentally over the long run, they're going to return and give you that. I would say that posting is only part of this strategy, however, and to be commenting is also another part of the strategy, which is something that I definitely overlooked at the beginning stages of my journey. So I think Leah had that recommendation earlier this week, and I definitely recommend following up on that too. Are there any tips or advice for growing a brand new LinkedIn company page? Commenting has been released. So back in the day, a company page was only able to comment upon a post which it had been tagged in. These days, as far as I'm aware, then a company page can comment on anything. And with that in mind, then I think really the first step is commenting on content that is relevant to your company, your brand, your customers, and doing so in a meaningful way. You have to seek out this information. You have to seek out these individuals to really add to a conversation. So I think that would be the first thing that I would suggest. The second thing is that right now it does seem like an algorithmic boost is going to company pages. So making sure that you are sharing content on the regular that is useful will be a good thing. Thirdly, you get 100 invites to a company page per month, I believe. So what you can do is you can invite 100 people per month to like your company page. I would suggest that you only do that for folks that are introduced to your company, because otherwise it won't be meaningful. But I don't think, I think that's the starting point for me. Nick suggests perhaps a LinkedIn strategy should be revenue based. And I think I agree to a point. So there is a big argument that marketing should be defined and measured by our revenue. And that is true. The ultimate output of marketing activity has to be a revenue-based figure. That's it. Or in fact, even beyond revenue, profit. Because ideally we are sitting in a place where we are also having an idea within the pricing strategy. What I would say, however, is that that revenue figure, I think, is a cumulative figure from marketing activity, rather than just say, for example, what is the revenue from this one specific post. I think it is a cumulative thing from your LinkedIn activity, your event strategy, your PPC, your SEO, whatever it is. And at the end, you combine it to your revenue figure and you say, you know what, this was worth it. I think there is higher order metrics that take place in a marketing strategy that are perfectly legitimate, whether that's reach, whether that's email signups, whatever it may be. I think a good marketing strategy has a cacophony of different metrics associated with it, which ultimately result in a revenue figure. So that would be what I'd suggest. How to improve the reach of company pages. I think I've covered that in the last question, so I'm going to stop there. If you're pitching a project, should you connect with them on LinkedIn? Yeah, why not? It's absolutely no problem at all, particularly if you're posting. It gets them to know you as a human being first and foremost. I'm a leadership coach trying to build awareness. I'm posting and commenting on posts. Is there anything else that I can do that is not spammy, please? I think really you're doing the right things to start off with. Fundamentally, I think by doing these two things, then you are putting yourself on the right track. The third thing I'd probably suggest is to take a moment to also start consciously connecting with individuals who may or may not be interested in your services. I think it's really important that you do so in a way that is thoughtful, so you are personalizing your invites. And Leah suggested after our session with her that you actually also send like an audio note or something like that straight after someone's connected with folks. I think that's important to show that you really, really care about the individual that you're speaking with, and therefore you're far more likely to build a meaningful connection. So that's where I'd be starting. I think you're doing a great job with posting. I think you're doing the good thing by commenting. Conscious connection would be my third point. Probably one you get asked all the time. But if you work for a stuffy, upright company, can you still build a genuine / authentic personal brand on LinkedIn? Yes, it's a cliche, but people buy from people. And today there is a multitude of ways that folks can breathe life into stuffy or uptight companies. Let's take insurance as an example. If an insurance brand was wanting to appear more relatable, more authentic, then they could start speaking about, the stories of the people that they help. There is a real meaningful story behind insurance where they look to help people recover from really serious life events. All of a sudden, that isn't about us. It's about the impact that our business has. It's very exciting. It's something that is meaningful, authentic, it's human. I think people get far too caught up in this sort of I work for a boring company thing. I think there's a real opportunity to create really meaningful brands behind things that are quote unquote boring. Thanks, Harry. Hopefully that's useful. How often should I be posting to my LinkedIn profile? I often put off posting purely because of lack of free time I have at the moment. I mean, posting on LinkedIn doesn't need to take an awful long time. I mean, I'm at the stage now where I probably spend no more than 5 minutes a day posting. However, I do make sure I try to engage with as many comments as I can during the course of the day. So probably I do spend up to like 45 minutes a day on my LinkedIn profile. Now I'm at a stage where I'm getting quite a few comments on my stuff. But certainly to start off with, it wasn't like that. I might be, it should be done outside given the weather. You're right, Dominic. I was outside before this, and now I'm wearing the jumper because I need to be branded. But I don't think there is like a defined number of how many posts you need to be doing all the time. I think what you need to be doing is saying, is this going to meet my strategy? Is it important to me? If it is really important to you, then it is something you have to prioritize. If it's not something that is important to you, then don't worry about it. There's no point sort of getting engaged with something if it's not going to benefit you or benefit other people. So if it's important, prioritize it. There's no number, but try your best. I post daily and it works out all right. But I would start from a place of how important is this to me? Next question. I'm doing a training strategy training session for senior stakeholders, non-marketers in the B2B space. We're using it for brand awareness, building personal branding, lead gen, and creating value with existing clients. What top tips do you have for me to deliver this training? It's a cheeky question, and I don't know the answer because it sounds like you're nailing it. I would, if we're speaking about trying to engage folks who wouldn't be excited about posting on LinkedIn, but then all of a sudden it's your job to try and encourage them, then I'll be showing them examples of how it's worked in the past. And I'll be showing people the opportunities that come from LinkedIn, whether it's friendships, growing businesses, why it's meaningful. I'll be spending time sort of trying to understand what is their motivations and then try to fit that around the training. Fundamentally, as marketers, as human beings, they're going to be sat there asking the question, what's in this for me? So I'd be looking to understand what's about them and build that around your agenda of brand awareness, personal branding, lead gen, and creating existing clients. What would be your key tips for starting out on LinkedIn? So I think we covered that before, but just to re-emphasize, I think there's posting, conscious connection, and commenting. Those would be 3 great places to start. I've also written up a blog post that is like 3,000 words long on everything I know about posting on LinkedIn. That's on the Marketing Meetup website. Go and check it out. Consistency is obviously key, but how to shake things up a bit? So consistency is important. I think it's really important. I think, but you can be consistent in different directions. So one can be consistently posting, but be posting different kinds of content. So whether it's video, audio, images, whatever it may be. Ultimately, you know, the content that you post is your option. Today, I'm trying something I've never done before, which is a LinkedIn Live. You can shake things up a bit by just trying new things, whether it's events, or indeed things like this. I think there's loads and loads of options with the functionality of LinkedIn that gives you the opportunity to fundamentally shake things up a bit. So it's only for you to explore those features and decide what is right for you. If you have 10 minutes a day to spend on LinkedIn, what is the activity you would do for maximum impact? So Leah had a great answer to this on Tuesday. Leah suggested that the best thing you can do for impact would be to comment on other people's stuff. Leah suggested that this would expose you to other audiences that will not be your own first and second connections, give you the opportunity to sort of be exposed to all these new people who may or may not connect. But it also gives you an opportunity, particularly for those who are a little bit less comfortable posting themselves, to share content. To share content that you're interested in and be a bit more cheeky on your own terms. You know, posting is difficult. The confidence element is particularly hard. So if you've got the opportunity to post in other people's content, that would be the thing you can do for maximum impact beyond posting. What tips will you give for growing business pages, especially when you're running it for a client and not your own? Well, I think we covered that earlier on, so I'm going to go past this question for now. I love how well LinkedIn works for organic content right now. Please never let it stop. But are there any tips for paid marketing using LinkedIn? Is it a thing? So of course, paid marketing is a thing. You can advertise on LinkedIn. And in fact, it's in terms of the demographics that you can target, it's a really, really powerful engine. However, it's insanely expensive as well. So I think the last campaign that we ran for the Marketing Meetup, our cost per click was something like £12 or something like that, which is crazy, you know, when you're speaking pennies on other platforms. So I think the first thing you need to be aware of is that your campaign, if it's going to be one of meaning, is going to be insanely expensive, and I think too expensive, really, unless you've got a huge budget. However, if you do choose to go about it, then you've got all the same options that you would on every other platform. You've got retargeting, and actually a really, really strong way of targeting people based on demographics, whether that's their location, their seniority, their job title. I think you can really nail in on something quite special. So I do think LinkedIn has its place, as long as you have the budget to do it meaningfully. Thank you, Richard, for saying I'm a good-looking dude. Appreciate it. Can you help me understand the blog function on LinkedIn? I've published a few, but they all seem to receive far fewer views than other non-blog posts. Any tips, or should I just not bother with blogs? I would. So the other word for blog, I think, on LinkedIn is article. So they also use that word to describe the same functionality. For me, Nick's going for it today. I love it. Insanely expensive. So I would recommend for those folks using the blog function on LinkedIn that they heavily look into the newsletter function instead of the blog posts. The reason for that is that you're able to post into a newsletter format your thoughts in a very, very similar format to what appears on blog posts and articles. However, folks get notified when a newsletter goes out. I haven't actually used this functionality, so I can't speak in depth. But Richard Wood, who was watching in at one point, has used it and is a big proponent of the newsletter functionality. So I definitely recommend looking into that rather than posting articles. It seems like a bit of a no-brainer. So I'd really heavily recommend that. The next question is about colleagues. So we've already covered on that. So I'm going to move to the next question, which is, I work in-house but want to develop my personal brand on LinkedIn. What's the best way to do it? My current job does not reflect my values or purpose. So I have to move past that last sentence because unfortunately, if that's the situation you find yourself in, then there is a recommendation that one may be looking for another job at some point soon that does find that you reflect your values on purpose. However, speaking on a far more practical basis, then I think the best way to do it is to know exactly what you want to say and the goal that you wish to achieve at the end. So I think the best recommendation I've had from Ash Jones, who started Great Influence, was to come up with content, a content pillar strategy that recommended that folks take 3 to 4 to 5 things that they wish to speak about, then create a narrative about those. So at the very top level, so say it's marketing, for example, you then select 3 to 5 things that you wish to speak about. So whether that's, I don't know, PPC, SEO, and Google Analytics. And then you write a narrative next to these things. So PPC is great, SEO is bad, analytics is really important. Then each day you have an opportunity to go off the back of this sort of high level thing, these topics that sit underneath it and the narrative, and consistently produce content that sits within each of these things. Fundamentally, what this means is over the course of time, when you're exposing your network to your content, you have the opportunity to create a narrative in their mind that matches the thing that you want to speak about on the regular. You then become known for that thing, which seems to be a really sensible way about about things. The other thing about that is that when one can see opportunities to react to content that sits within your wheelhouse. For example, GA4 this week has been a really big topic. And because you already speak about analytics, then you've got the opportunity to be a person who has a key voice on this because that's something you've become known for. So fundamentally, I think it's firstly important to know what you're speaking about, but then also to know why you're speaking about it. What's the goal? So where does this fit within your sort of marketing lifecycle, funnel, whatever you want to call it? Is it a higher level thing about sort of general awareness that you exist, or is it a far more consideration thing? Are you looking to drive people to your newsletter, come to your events? I think every one of these things are really important questions because that starts giving purpose to your action rather than just simply just doing things for the sake of it. So take the time to understand what you want to do and what you want to say. In your experience, what kind of content do you find gets the most engagement? Also, what content generates the most business? And where would you say they cross over in the Venn diagram? So I can speak more clearly on the first. I can speak a little bit clearly on the second, and I'll try on the third. So in your experience, what kind of content do you feel like gets the most engagement? It's a really good question, but I would probably start with a caveat, which is engagement in itself is not necessarily the most beneficial thing. For example, you could post a video of your dog. It'll probably get a bunch of likes, but is it going to help your business? Probably not. which is probably why you're asking the second question. So not all engagement is built equal. So that's the first thing you need to keep in mind. What kind of content generates the most business, therefore, is things that are related to your business. But I think it goes both ways. So, for example, if you look at someone like Dave Harland, Dave produces witty content on the regular every day, but you know that it's producing business for him because he's showcasing his skills too. So the kind of content that generates the most business is very simply the content that is most related to your business. One can share things about their lives, and it sort of builds it places your professional self into context. But the thing that is going to generate the most business fundamentally is that related to your business. So you got to see both. And I think one has to do both kinds of content, because if you do one only, then people are all of a sudden going to disengage from a sales process only. So you need to be able to build that context, have people engage with you, and ultimately they will sort of look to do business with you if they want to. So I think it's about building that relationship over the long term through your personal branding. If you want to use that term, it's a horrible term, but it's true. And it's both kinds of content. It's not just one kind. What's the biggest mistake you see in people's posts or a page that will put a client off? It depends on who your clients are. The greatest answers in marketing are always, it depends. However, what's the biggest you see in people put a client off? Honestly, I really think it depends who your clients are. So with the marketing meetup, we've been insanely lucky that we've got some wonderful sponsors who, I guess, in a different world and a different vernacular, could be considered quote unquote clients. I don't think they would be put off by me sharing something which is quite personal, because that's the relationship that we have. I think it really depends on the relationship that you have with your clients, with the type of people that you wish to seek, that is going to be the type of thing that says whether they're going to be put off by something or not. So really, that's an impossible thing to say. I think the only answer is it depends on what you do, who your clients are, and who you wish to work with, because don't forget, you have a choice in this too. Looking at the best tools to engage with LinkedIn and social media, what would you suggest? So the only tool that I actually use, and I genuinely use it, is ContentCal. And the reason for that is that I schedule my posts so I write my posts when I feel engaged, when I feel inspired to write. So I don't tend to sit down at my computer at 8:30 every morning and feel motivated and inspired every day. If I'm inspired, then I will schedule my post for the following day, or even a series of posts for the following days when I'm using LinkedIn. I do tell a lie, in fact, because there is a second tool which I use, which is Shield, and I use Shield for analytics on all of my content. And I don't use it on a post-by-post basis, but what I do is I holistically look year on year, how am I performing compared to last year, on reach, likes, shares, comments, and they've even got a nice little tool which sort of gives you an estimated value of your earned media based on what your CPM is. And that's a nice way of sort of saying, hey, you know what? I'm getting like 30 or 40 grand worth of free advertising through organic posting each year. So Shield is also worth looking at. So ContentCal and Shield. Thanks, Dominic. I'm glad it's useful. How do you balance being a professional, being a funny, quirky human being? Well, I'm not necessarily the latter one in terms of funny or quirky, so I can't necessarily comment on that. What I would say is that the boundaries of professionality are, I think, based far more in respect these days than an antiquated view of what being professional is. I don't think professional these days is necessarily a suit. I don't think it's having a specific car. I think professional is about being respectful to the folks that you are choosing to engage with, and deciding to say, you know what, I'm going to be respectful to you and your context. So to give a real life example, one may choose to walk into a building which the folks wear suits, and in that case, then probably being professional, one would choose to dress in a certain way to match their their context because you are looking to be professional in their eyes. It's not about changing who you are, but ultimately it's about being respectful to them in their context. That's how I choose to view professionality. And with that respect in mind, I think that generally speaking, being respectful is the modern day professionality. With that in mind, I would just say be respectful. That's probably the biggest thing. And that doesn't disqualify you from being a funny or quirky human being. We're all, frankly, a little bit bored of the stuffy stuff. So just, take the opportunity to be yourself. That's what people will engage with. Some people will choose to engage, others won't, and that's okay, as long as you're being yourself. You've got nowhere else to go if you've already started from a place of trust, authenticity, and honesty. If you've been all three of those things, then it's someone else's choice in how they choose to react to it. As an introvert, speaking for 40 minutes straight is quite difficult. I think we're about a third of the way through, so this is going to be a bit of a monster session. What is your biggest tip on getting started with posting on LinkedIn on your personal account? And what do you do when you feel like you have nothing interesting to post? So we've already established that some of the first things you can do when posting on your personal account and is by posting and commenting. So I would be focusing on those things first and foremost. When you feel like you have nothing interesting to post, I would be going back to that matrix that we spoke about earlier on, speaking about what are the things that you wish to post about, what are the things you wish to be known for. That is an easy starting point for you to sort of create something that feels significant, that gives you a basis of something to post from. So once again, that's having a topic at the top, so marketing, a series of topics underneath, SEO, PPC, analytics as an example, and then a narrative gives you the opportunity to choose what you wish to post. Next question. Given that LinkedIn is no longer a find me a job platform, where do you think it's going and its place across all of the social media platforms? Is there a low overlap with more personal platforms, a positive or distracting thing? Personally, I think it's a reflection. I think LinkedIn is a reflection of where we're going in the corporate world, which is that people are accepting more and more of the quote unquote whole human, which means to say that people are becoming more accepting and realizing that we can be ourselves in a professional environment as long as you're maintaining that respect, but come more as yourself. And personally, I think that's a great thing. So I really don't see any problem at all. Personally, I really disagree quite strongly with the Facebook isn't LinkedIn, LinkedIn isn't Facebook crew. It is, and therefore I think the place where LinkedIn is going is probably not going to be birthday celebrations, but it may well be far more personal stories, people placing their professional selves into context of themselves as a human being. That's where I think it's going personally, and I think that's a really positive thing. Next question. I will see that people say that when posting on LinkedIn, the post needs to be short to be of any effect at all. What do you think about this? I disagree. You only need to look at people like Dave Harland, Ellie Schlainer, Vicky Ross. Every one of these have both long and short posts. I think the content is the most important thing. I think there are certainly some tricks that one can do to engage and encapsulate the reader early on, like having a really, really strong headline, but I don't think they necessarily need to be short. Authenticity. I have a client who is running her own recruitment and coaching business. They need to up their LinkedIn game and make it more personal and to have an amazing story to share. However, they're not keen on monetizing the story. They've built a business while battling MS, which I think is inspirational and will help inspire other people, which is part of their business purpose. But how do I pitch this without looking like I'm trying to cash in on this illness? So that's okay, Nick. I'm okay with you disagreeing with me. That's absolutely fine. It's no problem at all. I think the difference between looking to cash in on something, and this really bleeds into the corporate purpose argument that sits in marketing, is that when something sits disingenuously or is not reflective of your actions, then folks have the option, or if marketing is disingenuous or lying or not honest or is simply looking to cash in on something, and that is what it's there as a pure purpose to do so, then fundamentally, then that is a wrong thing to do. So I think it's really, really important that folks realize that greenwashing is not a good thing to be doing, and it's actually fine for a company to operate in a way which actually optimizes for revenue and create a great product, and that's okay. However, I think something that can be said for great conversations around mental health and everything that's been going on is that if it's done with a genuine intent to help other people, then I think it's a good thing to be doing. However, I would be saying in this case, if the client isn't comfortable with it, then don't push them to do it. At the end of the day, it's their prerogative. It might be a great story, but there are plenty of great stories that can be told, and it can be stories about a person who has been recently hired and loves their new job. I think that is an equally inspiring story to be told, and therefore one doesn't have to push the barriers of vulnerability. We need to find a level which we are comfortable in ourselves. Personally, I'm very comfortable sharing a lot of things, and that's okay. But for them, it may be different. And if that's different for them, then we need to respect that it's different for them, and that's okay too. What's your best advice for creating a killer LinkedIn banner which serves as a billboard for your profile? I'm not even going to go there because I'm not a designer at all. I think it's useful to have a call to action, and it's useful to be visually pleasing, but that's where my knowledge starts and stops. So I would say speak to a designer about that. What is a plugin or program you cannot live without when creating LinkedIn content? So I mentioned them earlier, Content Cal and Shield. Do you find that what works on LinkedIn has changed since lockdown? Seems that people are posting more personal and less professional stuff. Professional stuff seems to have less engagement, or is it just me? I would say that the biggest thing that I've noticed over the course of LinkedIn and marketing in general over the past couple of years is that folks have been in a very different headspace to what we were back in 2019. And folks who would have engaged with our content before in a very meaningful way and may have found that inspiring, may on that day just not necessarily wish to engage with your content. That means to say, for example, I know we see it with a marketing meetup that will post an event that one day would be the best idea in the world for someone, and then the next day that same event is just not something they're interested in because they're in a completely different headspace. So with that in mind, then I would say that you have to acknowledge that everyone's going to be in a different headspace, and therefore whether it's professional or personal stuff, then people are going to be choosing to engage with it in different ways. So I don't think there's necessarily a divergence in less professional stuff, more personal stuff. I would just say that folks are choosing to engage in different ways, and different content will land differently on different days because the news has been a lot. It's been hard. How does posting about your metaphorical dead cat help sell stuff? Too much emphasis on the self. Mind you, indeed, Nick. I would say that I just don't. I think bringing yourself into work as your whole human being is a good thing. And for that reason, we have to be accepting that posting about that sort of stuff is part of the whole human being. And it's as simple as that. If you get to know people in context, the professional in their personal context, I don't see it as a problem at all. I think it's a good thing. And that's just what I believe. From a company perspective, what advice would you give to a newly merged company with a whole new commercial offering when it comes to engaging with a pre-existing audience and not alienating anyone with new comms products or services? So mergers are always difficult, right? Folks have the opportunity to engage with a new brand, and it's almost inevitably an alienating experience because we're having to get used to a different voice, a different tone. So fundamentally, I think you have to realize that it's not about you, it's about them. So how can you speak to them in a way which is consistent with what they wish to hear, with the brand that they're familiar with? I don't think there's any best practice advice that I've seen really work after a merger, other than to make sure that it's clear what the benefits are to people that a merger is happening. So for you, fundamentally, I'd just be switching the narrative. I'd just be saying, what is the benefit to a merger for the customer? You are not going to be speaking about, hey, look, we're really pleased to have merged. Nobody cares. You always see that thing at the beginning of these merger announcements where people say, we are so happy to announce. Nobody cares if you're happy to announce. They care about the impact on them and their lives. Therefore, the thing I would recommend is making sure that you keep the customer in mind and that you have that mindset rather than sort of saying, you know what, we want to engage a pre-existing audience. I just don't think it works like that. As a non-B2B, nothing to sell, nothing to advertise, what metrics should we keep on? Do followers' engagement matter that much? I would say that followers do matter, which is funny because it would appear that it could be a vanity metric, but I really don't think it is. And the reason for that is that I've definitely noticed over the past year or something like that, as my following has grown, then so has engagement. And engagement is indicative of other things. So for us with the marketing meetup, I pop a little call to action in on our newsletter on each of our posts. Right there is an opportunity for us to engage folks in a meaningful way through our newsletter, which eventually turns some people to attend our events. And if they choose to attend our events, then they may become part of the community and they may look after each other. So I would say that these figures do matter, but I wouldn't say that you need to judge your sort of abilities by them alone. To give an example, on engagement, then you may decide to make a post which is a lower order in the funnel. For example, you may choose to post a link to an event. It may get 3 likes on LinkedIn, but it may get 15 signups for your event. In that case, that's actually been a really successful post, even though it may not appear on the surface. So I think the important thing, just like anything in marketing really, is about making sure you're making the choice on what is success from this activity. And therefore, you can choose whether the engagement matters, whether the followers matter. But in your case, probably those things are good things to have in the background. There is a great quote that you should build your community before you need it. And followers is a biometric for something like that, even if it's not the most meaningful thing in the world. How can a small charity expand their audience on LinkedIn without spending money? We really can't afford to spend on social media tools, but would like to utilize what we have to the max. Well, the great thing is right now, LinkedIn is what could be considered an upside down social media network, which means to say that it is giving far more reach than any of the other platforms through their organic channels. And therefore, everything we've spoken about so far, whether it's posting, commenting, or consciously connecting, every one of these are opportunities to expand your audience on LinkedIn. How much time do you spend on LinkedIn per day? Probably around 45 minutes. As marketing experts, how can we actually crack, or rather really learn to work with LinkedIn algorithm? If a company page has a big following, 70,000 plus, and is posting content daily, but the content has low reach, how can this be fixed? Is there such a thing as a dead audience, or is the best way to promote a company page? That sounds like to me that there's probably a content problem rather than an audience problem. So for me, I'll be looking to switch up the content to something that is more relevant to the audience or is more likely to be engaged with, whether that's folks, whether that's memes, whether that's events that have more meaning. I don't really think there's such a thing as a dead audience on LinkedIn, but what I do think is that over time, you are more likely for your content to be penalized if you're not showing something that people wish to see. And therefore, I'll be once again switching that and saying, you know what, how can we benefit the customer? What is the thing that they're interested in? And therefore go from there. I think that's probably the place where I'd be starting from. I don't think they're necessarily a quote unquote dead audience. I think they are not engaging because you're probably not posting stuff that is of interest to them right now. How do you keep up with all the notifications without it getting overwhelming? I turn off all notifications on my LinkedIn, and I only choose to engage with what I wish to engage with. LinkedIn gives you great flexibility in your settings on what notifications you get. I've decided very recently in the past couple of months to turn them all off. And the real benefit there is that I can choose to engage with content if I wish to, but it's a conscious choice rather than being pinged at me. It's proactive rather than reactive. So for me, that's a really great starting point. However, if you're not willing to get rid of them all, then you can be far more selective on what notifications you do get. As I say, you just need to head into your settings and you've got the options to really customize your LinkedIn experience and your notifications especially. I found that if I post similar content, the post will get fewer and fewer impressions. But it's important to post more than once. E.g., our company needs to do an industry survey and want more people to engage. How do you solve this problem? I think folks, if they've seen the message 100 times across, are inevitably going to become blinded to it. I think also you're coming to a place which, if you're posting the same thing again and again, but you're starting from that place of we need more survey entries, then it is once again starting from that place of we need to do a thing and therefore we need folks to do it. So for you, I think the switch is, why is it a benefit to the customer? Why would they want to fill in your survey? If your content is engaging in a way which speaks to them or attempts to speak to them, then I think you're far more likely to have a survey that is responded to. If you're starting from a place of, look, can you just give me 10 minutes to fill in this survey? It's a not particularly compelling offer. So I'd be spending 5 to 10 minutes, just sit around as a team and write 3 to 5 reasons why someone would fill in your survey. Right there, you've got 3 or 5 different posts that would appear with different angles, but you then got that opportunity to engage with them in a way that is different, albeit around the same thing. The other thing to be said is that if you're posting an industry survey, you're far more likely to be posting something like a link. If you're putting a link in your post, then you're very unlikely to be getting the reach that you want. So I'd be suggesting posting a link in the comments or doing the John Asperian post edit post method. And I would be looking up John Asperian post edit post in Google to find out that. Glad it's been useful, Catherine, and thank you as well, Debbie. Appreciate it. It's the first time doing anything like this, so it's an experience. Do you think LinkedIn ads really work? Are they worth the money? What are your tips? So they're very expensive, as established earlier. Like any advertising, they have the option they can work, but you need to know what your objectives are. I think that really goes back down to that idea of what are you trying to get out of this, and therefore optimizing the experience for that. What is your experience for LinkedIn groups? They're rubbish, don't bother. How does one combine Leah's approach with B2B? There's a tension between personal and professional content. I think we've well covered that topic so far today. Many of us here, I think, are open to posting on LinkedIn, but what about those who are responsible for helping sales teams to prospect and trying to build personal branded culture in an organization? So this is something we answered earlier on, but the things that I'll be recommending is that you create a buddy system, you get a volunteer system, so folks volunteer themselves rather than just telling them to post. And then secondly, and thirdly, you also have a senior leadership member of the team leading the way through posting. I think all 3 of those things combined create a really quite potent opportunity to engage your team in posting on LinkedIn, and therefore I would do that. Thank you, Joe and Emily. It's really appreciated. So next question. I often suffer with lower self-esteem. I would love to post more on LinkedIn, but I'm always too scared. How do you overcome this? So first things first, like confidence is a huge thing, and it can be vastly underestimated and it can be swept under the carpet, but it's important. It's really, really important. And you know what? The first thing to realize is you are not by yourself. On Tuesday, we asked the question, does anyone else suffer with confidence on posting on LinkedIn? And we had so many comments with people saying, yep, that's me. So the first place I'd be looking to do is, rather than looking to post, I'll be just saying, you know what, I'm going to comment on a bunch of things that I feel like is meaningful. I think you get far more used to quote unquote putting yourself out there, sharing your opinions, but you're also doing the hard work in sort of creating new connections and building your network that way and exposing people to your content. So commenting feels really meaningful and will be an opportunity to help create conversations without necessarily putting yourself out there with posts. So that will be my starting point, but ease yourself into it. And you know what, just realize that you don't have to post on LinkedIn. It's a nice thing to do. It's a voluntary thing to do. But if it's really, really uncomfortable and it's the thing that you don't want to do, don't do it. Life's too short. How do you use personal posts to achieve corporate objectives? I think that the way that you use personal posts to achieve corporate objectives is by placing your personal self, your professional self, in a personal context. You'll be able to hear my daughter Annie in the background here. So fundamentally, there are going to be different types of posts. There are going to be some that are more awareness-based. There are going to be some that are more consideration-based. There are going to be some that are going to be based more around like acquiring new customers and driving revenue. Every one of these posts is different. Every one of these posts is going to be written in a slightly different way. For example, a personal post could be about how I really, really care for our newsletter. There is an opportunity there to speak around our newsletter, but do it in a way that feels real. So I will be saying something like, the newsletter really saved our business 2 years ago. It was a dark day, but fortunately we had the newsletter, and all of a sudden the community responded in a really meaningful way to our newsletter. Right there, it would be simultaneously advertising the newsletter, but then it would also be speaking about something that is personal, my personal experience of it. So that is one option. Pragya in our webinar also said that you could take a quite corporate post and just put the I in it, which means to say you can start from a place of that corporateness, but then also just relate yourself and your personal experience to that experience. And then all of a sudden you have this thing, which is a far more personal post, but is something which is relevant to your corporate too. So there's options. How do you manage to respond to comments when you have tens of thousands of followers? In terms of response times, and how much time in a typical day do you spend posting and then responding to engagement? So this has been something I've had a reasonable amount of guilt with quite recently, and trying to figure out. I think fundamentally, I think you got to do your best. So I think you can't just post and then leave it and expect folks to engage and just sort of speak at you. It's meant to be a conversation, but at the end of the day, you got to also balance this with the rest of your work and the rest of your day. And therefore, I think the important thing to do is set a boundary that you're comfortable with. Whether that's saying, I will respond to comments for the first 5 to 8 hours, I'll respond to the comments for the first day, whatever it may be. There's got to be a point where you got to stop responding to comments, because you'll be on this endless loop if you're posting every day, such as myself. So I think fundamentally, make sure you are engaging, but I think there's also a realistic expectation that if someone is posting on a comment that is like a week, commenting on a post that is like a week old, then ultimately, there is an expectation that they may not hear back. If they were really, really bothered, they could also DM, and that's an option too. Next question: posting more than once a day, yes or no? Completely up to you. I think it's okay. I don't think you're likely to see high engagement numbers if you're posting like 5 times a day, because I do think there's a cannibalization of a post after your next one comes out, which means to say that if you post once, it gets a certain curve of reach. If you post the second time within that time, my perception, and this is not confirmed, is that the first post's reach will start to decline. So give yourself the opportunity to let that post breathe before taking the time to post the second one. There's nothing wrong with scheduling a post for the next day and letting that first post breathe. Does vulnerability being non-professional on a professional site as LinkedIn? No. Full stop. LinkedIn algorithms. Are there some top level tips, rules that I can apply? If posts are only liked by people I work with, is this detrimental? So there is some tips that you can apply. So the first thing I would be doing is making sure I'm not taking advantage of the share function. I don't think it's useful. That would be the biggest thing that I have about posting. After that point, whether it's an image, video, text-based post, I think any one of those things are valid and useful posts. So that's the most important thing. The second thing is that, well, the most important thing is to realize that you're writing for a human being, not the algorithm. There have been some posts that I've made which have a link in them, which is something which is quite detrimental to reach and doesn't go with the algorithm, that have had hundreds and hundreds of likes. At the end of the day, the reason for that is that people have chosen that that is content worth engaging with. So I think that's really important. The third thing is that you asked about whether if posts are only liked by people I work with, is this detrimental? Truth is, I have no idea. I would have a suspicion that if folks from your work are the only people liking your stuff and are doing so repeatedly, then there would be something in the algorithm that probably does recognize that, but there's no way I can confirm that. So like, that's just like pure speculation. Next question, increase reach on business pages when employees don't share. By getting other people to share, by creating great content that other people want to engage with, not just your employees. Hey, Leah, Pragya, and Joe in this case. I'd love to hear more about your strategies for building relationships on LinkedIn. It's quite easy to add connections, but what connections alone don't cut for success on LinkedIn strategies. How do you use it to build relationships with new connections? Any tips on doing this in a way that is time efficient would be really valuable. I think we've established two ways that are really meaningful here. The first is posting. The second is commenting. The third you may choose to engage with is DMing. So you can DM someone and say, hey, just to let you know, I really liked your content. I think that's a really nice opportunity to engage with someone one-on-one. So I think that's the third method that you have at your disposal. So definitely look at that. I'm going to skip over the next one about vulnerability. We've spoken about that at length. How should young people maximize their effectiveness on LinkedIn? The same as every other human being on LinkedIn. How much curated versus created content should I be posting on LinkedIn for B2B? There is no one answer. There is only the answer, which is what is right for your customers. It may well be that your customers benefit from signposting to content, and therefore that is the most important things to them. If that is the case, then that's absolutely fine. Use that as your opportunity to just curate. If they're bothered about your creation and about you personally, then create. Fundamentally, it's not about you, it's about your customers. And whether that's B2B or B2C, that particular rule doesn't change. Any tips for getting a sales team who barely have profile pictures on LinkedIn engage with building personal brands? We've discussed this earlier. What are your guys' number one tips for personal branding within a sales recruitment team? Sharing personal experiences. Okay, we've covered this now. We're starting to get some repeat questions now, which is good. How do you come up with constant but unique content? I would be using the matrix or just looking out for those opportunities on the day-to-day basis. I think one of the great things about consistency with your LinkedIn content is that it becomes a muscle that can be really built up over the course of time. So I would be stating that once you start getting into the flow of creating LinkedIn content, you start seeing opportunities everywhere to write about this. Dave Harland was speaking about this the other day, that once you start on this particular journey, then you start realizing there's opportunities everywhere. So that's, I'd be starting from that place of creating a content matrix, but after that point, I'll be starting to get into the flow of creating more content. Videos on LinkedIn, any tips? Do you need a proper setup with Kit? So I think Leah had some great advice earlier this week to optimize for 60 seconds or less. I think that is where the world is going in terms of video content, and therefore that is what I would recommend. Do you need a proper setup with Kit? No, your video camera on your phone is absolutely fine. The one thing I would say that makes the biggest difference is two things. The first is audio, so make sure you've got a lapel mic or even a Bluetooth lapel mic or something similar. And then the second is lighting. I was amazed the difference that lighting makes to the production quality of the Marketing Meetup stuff. So get yourself a ring light. They don't need to be expensive. Mine was about 50 quid. I think that would really take your stuff to the next level. I'm a freelancer and get more engagement on my personal profile than my page. What can I do to improve my engagement? I think that is representative of most people's experience on LinkedIn. Most personal profiles are going to get more engagement than their page. The first thing you could do is just lean into that. Say, you know what, I'm absolutely fine. Especially in your situation as a freelancer, then the business is kind of you. So it's really no problem if your personal profile is getting more engagement. However, if you want to be getting more engagement on your page content, then I think you need to be posting content that is more tips and tricks, a little bit more disembodied from you as a human being, and far more about what your skill set can be useful for, and helping folks to create that sort of stuff. How many times can you share a company page with your connections? How many times is too many? I would say more than once is too many. You can invite 100 people to your company page per month, and then you get your credits reset. We've established about company pages, and everyone is speaking about more tips for company pages. So hopefully that's been useful so far. Do you find looking at LinkedIn too much and fuels imposter syndrome? The answer is certainly that it can do. However, I would say that there's also a secondary answer, which is it depends on the experience that you choose to curate for yourself on LinkedIn. So there is some stuff which is absolutely unavoidable. And so the answer is yes, of course, it fuels imposter syndrome because it seems like everyone else is doing well and you are not. Simple truth is that we're all human beings, we're all trying our best, and there'll be some moments where we are good and there will be some moments where we are bad. Imposter syndrome is bloody difficult. However, on the second point about sort of curating your feed, I think there is some things you can be doing. So you've got the option to mute certain individuals if they are causing you undue anxiety or are not choosing to engage with you in a way which you feel is beneficial to your life. You can also choose to block or disconnect from folks. This also has the same effect. Fundamentally, LinkedIn will show us things that they think we are going to engage with. So it's up to us to also make sure that we are curating our streams in such a way, which means that our experience of LinkedIn can be both productive in terms of business objectives and personal objectives, but also protective in terms of our mental health. So yes, it can definitely fuel imposter syndrome, but hopefully there's some tools that we have at our disposal to help with that. Are LinkedIn newsletters and the articles worth doing on business pages? Richard would say yes. So I'm going to leave it with him and say yes. No problem, Debbie. Thank you for being here. For a personal profile, what do you do with contact requests? In other words, LinkedIn used to be the only place you could link with people you knew, met or reached out to. Now people seem to request to link with anyone without any indication why. So personally, I choose to accept pretty much all the requests unless they're very plainly going to do a sales pitch straight afterwards. That doesn't mean that you have to. I think you have to come up with a strategy that suits you and your business. And therefore, if you choose to accept a bunch of people, then you have to accept that you're going to have a slightly less curated experience. However, there is benefits the other way in terms of exposure to your content where you never know who's linked to who. However, your LinkedIn is your LinkedIn. So I think it's good to come up with a policy that you are comfortable with and not feel like you need to accept everyone. We've spoken about vulnerability a lot, so we're going to move past that. On the LinkedIn business page, should you use the notify employees button to encourage post sharing? I don't think there's any harm in this. I think they actually do place a restriction on the amount of posts that you can notify employees about. So I think that's okay. I would say use that button. It's okay. That's what it's there for. Your views on using emojis in posts. It depends on your context, but honestly, I really think emojis are becoming part of the vernacular of human beings these days. They're almost like a language in themselves. So long as your audience is likely to understand them, then I really don't think there's any problem with using emojis at all. I don't think they're informal. I just think they're part of how we communicate more and more these days. However, it's absolutely up to you to understand your audience and therefore whether emojis will be effective or indeed appropriate. It's probably best to comment as an individual, agreed, but can commenting on posts as a company be effective? Yes, absolutely. So I think it's probably more appropriate, as you say, to be a human being behind it. But if it's appropriate, you need to look at people like Innocent and Specsavers as an example. If you've got some sort of brand awareness behind yourselves, commenting as a company has a real power too. So I would say, as long as it's relevant and brand aware and consistent with your brand, then it's absolutely fine to be posting from behind the brand. Although we do need to recognize that it would be better from a human being first. My duty is posting on our company's official account. As an official account, how do you balance commenting and posting? What kind of tone do you use when commenting and posting and replying when someone asks you? So the second half of that question is, it depends on you, your company, and the tone that you want to get across. That is defined by you and your strategy. It's defined by your research. So knowing your customer, knowing your strategy will dictate your tone, which therefore dictates how you use these tactics. How do you balance commenting and posting? I think both have equal value. So I would be making sure that if you are posting, that you are doing so, but making sure you're responding to comments. Equally, commenting is a great way to expose yourselves to new audiences who may not have chosen to like your content in the first instance. So therefore, I would be choosing to do both. When your organization is very specialist and you as the lead communicator really isn't, i.e. science, and I'm not a scientist, how do you build your organization's following? Fundamentally, it's about understanding who your customer is and the language that they use, and therefore matching your messaging to the language that those folks use. Whether that is technical or non-technical, I think you can speak to scientists in a very human way. My wife, for example, is a scientist, and I don't need to speak to her in scientific language for her to understand. That being said, I think it's very important that if you are a marketer in those organizations, that you are reflecting your communication in a way which is something which benefits those reading. So it's for you to understand how these folks would like to be spoken to, and therefore speak to them in that way. That may be technical, it may not be. Only you know that answer by doing your research, defining your strategy, and using your tactics in that specific way. How do you put content out without feeling uncomfortable when you are inherently introverted? Do you have an idea how to make company posts more personal and therefore more viral? Second one is more tricky. I don't know is the truth on the second one. So let's try and answer the first one, because I too am introverted. I think it's about choosing how comfortable you are to share and defining your own boundaries. As was stated earlier on, folks don't have to engage with LinkedIn. We don't have to post. We don't have to comment. So if you're uncomfortable to the point of not wanting to do it, then maybe that's a signal to not do it, and that's okay. However, if you are uncomfortable but you do want to do it, then I would say start off in a small way, commenting first, then move on to posting. That would be something that is an easier entry route, and will help you sort of get used to using the platform too. Next one. Delighted to be here today, and thanks for sharing your experience and expertise. I've recently joined a company that works with multiple industries and markets around the world, but has just one centralized LinkedIn channel. I've never come up against this challenge before. Any tips on how to create conversations with more targeted audiences when the content you're able to post is restricted to fairly high level and generic messaging? It's a really good question. So maybe I would say that that restriction is probably the right thing, in that you have the opportunity to create these high level conversations, but then the devil is in the detail, in the comment section. So I'd be looking for the comments that are coming out from folks and actually saying, engaging them in a conversation which is far more deep, meaningful, and reflective of them as people. It's one of those things that when you speak to a larger audience, inevitably your messaging starts to have to become more high level, but you can still engage with folks in a conversation, albeit in the comments, rather than a specific post. Any advice on getting your potential clients to agree to a getting to know you conversation on a call? So taking a relationship further, bringing it offline, and developing a genuine one-to-one relationship further. So there's nothing worse than a cold email or a cold in-mail that comes into your inbox, which is untargeted, irrelevant, and ends with a question, have you got 15 minutes? So the first thing I would be saying is develop a genuine relationship with people and give them a reason why they would want to have a one-on-one conversation with you. I think time is the one resource that so few people have, and therefore to be asking for it is a really difficult thing, particularly early on in a relationship. If you're looking to establish something of authenticity and based in genuine sort of human emotion, then take the time, just chill out. You know, it's not the fifth date, it's the first date. So sort of manage it in that way, rather than sort of feeling like you need to go into this acquisition-based mindset straight away, or one-to-one. It may well be that the people that you're engaging with actually much prefer to stay in the DMs than they do to go onto Zoom. Fundamentally, if you're thinking about your customer, if that's the truth for them, then that's where you have to meet them. It may well be that they come around to your reality one day, but you have to meet them where they are to start off with. I am the sole marketing department for a SaaS business and find it difficult not having anyone to bounce creative ideas off. What do you recommend for us low marketers? We have huge clients who spent thousands, and when I overthink it, I'm not posting anything. Engage with the community like the marketing meetup. That's what we're there for. Your communities are out there for sure. What tools are out there? I've already mentioned. Tips on using hashtags. Should they be used in how many, and do they make an impact? On the impact question, genuinely, I don't know, but it can't harm. It doesn't harm. So generally speaking, I use 3 to 4 hashtags in each of my posts. And I think really, rather than expecting them to expand the reach, I think what hashtags do really is signal the intention that what a post is about. So it may be about community or marketing or whatever it may be, but at the bottom, if they can see something which sort of says this post is about this, they can choose to engage or not. It's just another signal. It's another opportunity. So use 2 to 3 or 3 to 4. No idea if they make an impact, but it can't harm. Creator mode or not, it's been offered to me, but some of my connections have seen their engagement bomb when they switched it on. So I'm not sure whether to do it or not. I likewise saw reports of folks having their engagement bomb after they went to creator mode. As far as I'm aware, you can still turn it off even after you've turned it on. So it's worth an experiment. For me, when I turned it on, I saw no difference in my engagement, and therefore I have no problem in recommending it. However, it may be your experience is different. It may be that it's different now. So you can turn it on, have a little experiment. If it doesn't work out, you can turn it off again, so far as I'm aware. How do you create a good company post? You need to worry about. Next question was, how do you create a great company post? I really think it just goes back down to your customer. What do they want to know? What's the messaging that resonates, and going from there. I think that's really the starting point. There are some tricks that one can use to make a post that is far more likely to be engaged with. For example, the first line in your post is really, 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 really important. Your headline, treat it like a headline. So that would be my sort of top tip, is have a headline that counts. I think ultimately company posts are far more likely to be tips and tricks based. They might be memes, they might be quotes. That's certainly how we're thinking about it. Certainly don't include any links. Don't worry about sharing, and just look to tell a story of the human beings that are within your company as well, and also your customers. Fundamentally, it's about the customers. So if you remember that, you can go from there. On company pages, have you ever measured conversion rates from interaction to customers? Which B2B companies are doing their company pages well? I'd love some examples to look at. Should your company page look like your personal page? So some examples of company pages that are doing well. Gong is one, which is a telecommunications measurement software. They do a really great job. And also check out Shield, which was run by Pragya, who was our guest on Tuesday. She is likewise doing a great job. Conversion rates from interaction to customers. Never measured it, so don't know. Should your company page look like your personal page? No. I would suggest that your company page is far more generic, tips and tricks, whereas your personal page is about you. Biggest tip for establishing your personal brand, we've spoken through. How important is it to have a premium account when building a personal brand through LinkedIn? I think it is not that important at all to have a premium account. I think it actually gives you extra functionality that is more beneficial to salespeople and recruiters. But so far as I can tell, it doesn't give you any algorithmic benefit in terms of boosting your post any more than anyone else. Therefore, if you do not want a premium account or cannot afford it, which is perfectly reasonable, it's not cheap, then I don't think you need to worry too much. What's the speaker's point of view on and outlook on LinkedIn audio, and when will it be available to everyone? I don't know when it will be available to everyone. It's definitely in beta at the moment. However, what I would say is LinkedIn audio is a tool like anything else. It will probably have a big moment at the beginning where people are like, we need LinkedIn audio. But fundamentally, it will be down to us to create experiences that matter to people on the platform in a way that is beneficial to those watching, which means to say it's no point shoehorning in LinkedIn audio straight off the bat. I think it's worth optimizing the experience for human beings first and choosing a platform that is representative of that, whether that's slides, videos, LinkedIn audio, LinkedIn lives like this, whatever it may be. Do you connect or follow? You choose. You choose. I choose to follow first and then engage, and then I may connect later. Do I post videos on company pages and notify employees? Tag companies using hashtags, but the insights are not that great for organic impressions. I'm not sure I understand the question, I'm afraid. Best way to promote webinars through LinkedIn. I will be establishing an event through your company page, which allows you to create an event, which you can then subsequently invite people to sign up for that event. You also have the option, once that event has been created, to add the speakers to that particular event, which enables them to display the event on their profile, which will give you extra exposure. And as I say, make sure you're taking advantage of that invite functionality, inviting relevant people who may wish to attend. Something I would recommend, however, is avoiding just inviting anyone willy-nilly. There's no point. It's silly, and it could in fact do damage. What's the ideal length for LinkedIn live broadcasts? I do weekly for about 30 minutes. Well, we are 1 hour, 26 minutes and 54 seconds into this one, and it's probably too long. This is a personal account. It's commenting 30, 40 posts every day. Important to keep your reach high. That is apart from profile optimization and posting quality content. That sounds like a load of comments every day. I think John Asperian recommends at least 5 comments for every post. So 30, 40 is exceptional. So it's probably not doing you any damage, but it's just whether you've got the time for that. What's the best time to post on LinkedIn? Well, LinkedIn is an international platform now, so really it's becoming less and less about a best time, because the different time zones will react differently. So it depends where your network is. For me, I post like around 8:14 to 8:36-ish each day. For me, that is a time that works for me. But I think it depends where your customers are and where they want to. I think the calculation you can do in your mind is saying, when are people most likely to be scrolling through LinkedIn? And that is dependent on your customers. But for most people, that will be sort of beginning of the day, lunchtime, and maybe a little bit at the end of the day. When you have and this is the last question, when you've written a blog that sits on your own website, what's the best way to promote that on LinkedIn without it being demoted or including a link? How can you get employees to post about it too? So we've done the employee bit. So let's do the last bit, which is about how would you promote it on LinkedIn? For me, I'd be posting something that is a snippet or a summary of the entire article, and then encouraging people to check out the full blog post by seeing a link in the comments. That would be the way that I'd do it. Alternatively, you could do something like take it to the next level and summarize the blog post using a visual cue like a slide functionality, and create the key points into a PDF that you upload that way, and make it look really nice and visual. But you also have the benefit of providing a good amount of detailed information in a way that is native. Fundamentally, it's about providing an experience that is optimized for LinkedIn, not optimized for driving people to your website necessarily. Although if you were to do that, I would be recommending you posting a link in the comments. Cool. So 1 hour and 30 minutes, almost to the dot. That's 102 questions about LinkedIn, roughly, answered. Hopefully that's useful. Thank you very much, and I'll see you soon. Take care.